Hey everybody, this is Kevin from Fort Orange Woodworking. Today's video, I'm going to start right down here in the shop. My plan is to take this charging station that I made for my kids and make a little bit more of a grown-up version. This thing is, it charges all their Kindles. It's got slots for it, and it's a box, so it has a lid. And I hide a multi-port charging cord in here, and have a couple of holes in the back for the charging. What's the word? Outlet. That thing. Sure. And separate holes, smaller ones, for each individual charging device that plugs in down here. So, I'm going to take this idea, made this from plywood, and I'm going to kind of transfer it to a more grown-up version using this vintage port box that I disassembled. I've got some other pieces from this. I used them from another project, but this is going to kind of be the framework for this project and the inspiration. So the first thing I'm going to do is get out my notepad and start sketching up some plans, and then we are going to get started right away. Once I figure out what the word for this thing is, I'll show you one in a second. Hold on. Stay tuned. To get the most out of this board, I'm going to cut it down to about 2 1/4 inches or so. On the plywood version that I showed you earlier, that one's more like 3 inches, but in order to get all the words to line up on this the way I wanted to, I had to make it a little smaller. You can really go any size you want on this as long as your box is big enough to hold that outlet cord. You should be fine. Even though I drew some plans for this project, I still like to do a quick dry fit just to get a visual idea of how things are going to be put together. I cut this little scrap block here so that I knew how deep this box was going to be, but then I compared it to the shorter words, which are going to be on the side of the box, and this made it easier to just visually make my marks as to where the sides of the box were going to be cut. I could have done some math on this, but honestly the scrap block just made this process a lot faster. Then it's back over to the table saw where I use my mini crosscut sled to cut my marks for the sides of the box. I used to have a much bigger one of these, but I built the smaller one, and I gotta tell you, I use this thing all the time. I hardly ever use my miter saw now for straight cuts. I feel like I have a lot more control, and I get more precision cuts with the mini sled that I built here. So if you don't have one yet, I would suggest that you take some time to put one together. Real simple to make and real handy to have in the shop. Next, I'm going to use my little cheat method here again. I'm going to line up these two boards because one is going to be a top and one is going to be the face. And I know that since I already have my face cut, then I can use that as my template to just mark without having to measure on both sides and possibly screw up my math. Since this project is basically just a simple box with a little bit of embellishment, you can build the box however you want. I'm using butt joints on this because I already did the measurements for it, and frankly, I just felt like it was going to be a lot easier to just do a butt joint box on this. So I'm using some glue and some corner clamps. You could do miters if you want. Either way, you're probably going to be holding this together with glue because these pieces are less than a ½ inch thick. And I find that anytime you're trying to keep something together that's less than a ½ inch thick, it's going to be held by glue. It's going to be really tough to get even tiny brad nails in there. So a glue up it is. And this piece of OSB that I'm cutting here is going to be the base of the box. I'll cover that later, so it doesn't matter what this looks like. It's going to be strong and functional, and I'll cover it later so it looks better. And once again, there's lots of ways I could make this box. I could have cut some grooves in it for the pieces to slide in nicely, but honestly, for what I need this for, a glue up is going to be just fine. This is not master craftsmanship that I'm working on here. This is just a simple box to hold my charging cords. So I'm just going to be holding this together with some glue. Nothing fancy. Then once the glue is applied, we can clamp this thing together and give it a chance to dry. And this is where the project starts to get a little tricky. This is the tough part of the build. I cut some grooves in my top board here, and they're angled cuts that I cut on my table saw. If you look in the top left corner, you'll see a jig that I have there. It just, oh, there it comes back again. If you look in that top left corner, you'll see an angled jig that I used to cut parallel lines into this top board here. And I just did 2 cuts, shallow depth of about 1/4 inch or so. And now I'm just cleaning it up with my chisel to get some grooves for the rack pieces to sit in. So that's what I'm doing here. And now here comes the most time-consuming part. I photocopied one of my pieces so that I had an exact copy of the dimensions of this, because the rack pieces are going to obscure these cool words that we got from this port box, which was kind of the whole point. We don't want to cover it up. So I had to think of something to get those words to show again. And you're going to see, I'll cut this out. I'm going to apply it to the rack pieces. And I'm actually going to try to burn the words back on at a different angle so that it creates an illusion that they are a continual a continual flow of the word. So you'll see what I mean. Stand by 1 second, it'll show up. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that letter D that I cut out, and I'm going to try to see what angle is going to give the best appearance when I try to burn it, because this rack piece is going to be standing straight up. And honestly, I do not have a degree in graphic design, so I'm just kind of winging it on this and hoping that it looks good enough for my purposes. So a little bit of experimentation on this and playing with the angles to finally get it where I wanted to, where I felt comfortable with marking it on the rack pieces. Obviously, if you do this project yourself, you don't need to do any of this. You can do something without words on it, or just skip this part altogether. But I'll give you a little close-up there to show you what it looks like when it's standing straight up. Okay, now back to the table saw, because I am cutting a couple of rail pieces that are going to go on the underside of my box top, and that way the box will kind of nestle on the bottom portion nice and neatly, nice and tight, without rattling or sliding off. So that's what these cuts are for. Then I'm just going to glue these pieces onto the underside of the box top and clamp them tight and let them dry. Don't mind my shiny bald head. Next, I'm marking the back of the box, and this is where I'm going to be drilling my holes for my charging cords to fit through. And just keep in mind that you got to make your holes big enough for your whole cord to fit through. If you make them too small, it can be a little bit tricky to go back and make those holes larger. So make sure that you're making them big enough. Do a couple of test runs on a scrap piece if you need to. Don't want to make that mistake on your finished product. I decided that I was going to cut my hole for the outlet itself in the bottom of the box, mainly because I didn't have the space to cut it on the back without cutting into the words. So I decided to go through the bottom. You could go through the back, and frankly, with my plywood design that I make for my kids, all of the chords go through the back, none of them go through the bottom. But for this one, I didn't want to ruin the aesthetics, so I just made sure that it was big enough to fit the whole plug, and I'll create a channel next so that this thing doesn't wobble when the cord pops out of the back. But you have a lot of freedom with this. You can do whatever you want. You can play with this and put that cord hole wherever you feel you need it. One last dry fit before I stain this box, and everything seems to be to my liking here. Everything's fitting nice and tight, nice and snug, and this thing is ready to get finished. Now, I'm aware that everybody already probably knows how to stain, but I like to put this clip in, even if it is on fast forward, just because you have this idea in your head of what you want your project to look like, and even when it's all done, it's not quite there, it's not quite finished until you put on that stain or that finish and really get an idea of what this thing is finally going to look like. So I included it in the video. I probably always will, honestly, because it's just really satisfying to see the end come to its conclusion. And look at that, it's a nice rich medium brown color. Really brings out the words of the port box. Blends it in a little bit. It's not a full contrast. I really like the way the colors worked with this. And the best part about this project was it cost me next to nothing. I don't think that there was a single thing that I had to buy for this project. A friend of mine gave me the port box. I had the OSB laying around. I've already got a collection of stains and scrap wood. So ultimately, this cost me $0. So extra win on this. I'm just taking a piece of steel wool here to the whole box because the stain did not apply as evenly as I hoped it would between the old port box and my new scrap pieces. So I'm just taking a piece of steel wool to sand it down a little bit and make it an overall lighter and weathered look to kind of balance that out. There you have it. I did one final light sanding of this and I am pretty much done. I also went ahead and added a little bit of shelving paper that I had left behind just to give it some padding and cover up some of that rough plywood that I was using for the bases. I still need to cut a hole here for my outlet. I'm just waiting for the shelving paper to dry that I glued on. But other than that, this thing's done. I got the port holes in the back for the cables, the large hole for the outlet, the top fits on nice and snug, and this thing's not perfect. I did a little experimenting with the burning technique on some scrap wood to try to carry over the letters as best I could. I think that turned out kind of cool. It's not perfect, like I said, but it's kind of neat. And honestly, this thing's going to be practical. It's gonna go to use. This is going to sit on my nightstand to charge all my stuff and hide some of those cords. So overall, I'm pretty happy with this. I am going to go back and do another video for the kids version using 1/2-inch plywood, so stay tuned for that one. It's going to have a much neater appearance, a lot more clean lines on that one, a lot less experimentation. Anyway, if you like this video, please remember to like and subscribe, and I will see you next time in the shop. Thanks a lot. Take care.